Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. Welcome to the Women of Golf Show. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and right alongside here is Legends Tour player and LPGA professional, Cindy Miller. Good morning, Cindy. Oh, I'm not sure. Cindy was with me here, but for some reason she...
I am here.
There you are. For some reason, I don't know what to do you. But good morning,
Cool.
Cindy. You were there 1 minute. We're gone next, but glad to have you here. Anyways, welcome to the Golf Show. I apologize for that. Before we talk about our guest this morning, Cindy, let me just remind everybody, of course, that we're live every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time until 10 a.m. Here on Blog Talk Radio, Women of Golf, and just go to that site, blogtalkradio.com. In the search key, you can type Women of Golf, and that'll get you right to the homepage. And obviously, every Tuesday morning, we are live, and at the top there will be the current and most recent show. But if for some reason you've missed some of the previously aired shows, they are auto-recorded as well. So you can go to that page at blogtalkradio.com/Women of Golf, and you can just scroll down to the on-demand section and be able to pick us up there as well, any of the previously recorded shows, in case any you missed. We're available for download through iTunes under the podcast section. Again, just go to itunes.com, search under podcast, and type in Women of Golf, and you'll be able to find us there as well. Also, if you want to speak to Cindy or I or guests during the live broadcast on Tuesday, you can do so at area code 341-945-5855. And you can also email any questions or comments about the program to womenofgolf@gmail.com. And if you need to reach me or Cindy, my personal email is ted.golflive@gmail.com. And Cindy, of course, is cindy@cindymillergolf.com. And also, if you're interested in coming on the show, if you're somebody in the golf industry and you think you have something to share with the audience, please reach out to Cindy at cindymillergolf.com, and she will do her best to fit you into our schedule. Cindy, we've got a great guest this morning, Jan Beljan, who is the owner of Jan Beljan Golf Course Design, and she's going to be joining us here in just a few moments. But quite a cool story, actually. I was reading through some notes last night as I was preparing for the show, and has quite a few in her family. Of course, we're in the golf business. Very well respected PGA professional. And also she worked, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, she worked with Tom Fazio, one of the premier golf course designers.
Yes, she's an amazing woman. She's really achieved a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's in fact, we can't get it all on the show because it would take up most of the show, some of her accolades now, but just an incredible woman and just a great asset to the business. Also, she is a managing partner at the National Women's Golf Alliance, and a long-time contributor, of course, to multiple disciplines of golf. And she's received some very highly acclaimed notices, if you will, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we get her on the show. But very, very interesting woman, and we'll bring her out here. So what's been happening in the world of Cindy Miller Golf here in the last week since we talked last?
Well, we were in Stamford, Connecticut yesterday at Sterling Farms Golf Club, where the LPGA Northeast section had a workshop on technology in golf. We went through how to use TrackMan and FlightScope during a lesson, and BodyTrack, which is an amazing new gadget that helps you to measure the center of pressure in your feet as you swing.
Wow.
I have purchased BodyTrack, and it's basically a rug with a lot of fancy sensors in it, and it's totally amazing to find out whether the weight is on the balls of your feet or your heels, how much of your weight or center of pressure shifts when you swing. They call them traces. So it was very interesting. In fact, I'm going to have the developer of BodyTrack come on the show with us. He happens to be a friend of mine. I went to the University of Miami with him. He's a very smart guy, smarter than me. But I never thought about my feet when I was swinging, but it's an amazing thing. So we were in Connecticut. We got home late last night, and today we are going to Florida.
Good for you.
Yep.
Well, it's where I am in Northwest Florida. It's overcast and a little cooler than it's been, but I'm sure it's much. I'm sure you'll be going a little further south in Florida than I am, but I'm sure it's a little bit better than what you're experiencing up in Buffalo right now. But it's interesting that you mentioned about the feet, Cindy, because I remember early on some of the discussions Jack Nicklaus had on TV about the golf swing. He often talked about the importance of proper transition using the feet, and a lot of people are looked at. They just figure I'm standing and so on and so forth. But there is a certain and really a lot of times you kind of do it if you're swinging properly. It's kind of a natural movement. So a lot of people don't put thought into that. So it'd be interesting to hear what this gentleman's going to have to say when he comes on as a guest. I'd be interesting to find out a little bit more just about what kind of a role the feet really do play in golf swing.
Yes, it's very amazing, and awareness of what's really happening. You can practice watching the trace, as they call it, in your feet of what happens. I was amazed. I'm trying to shift my weight too much because, again, I'm trying to hit it further. And really, it's helping me to lose distance. So our students have learned an awful lot. And I tend to come up on my toes. So does Lexi Thompson and Laura Davies, and doesn't seem to hurt them too much. But there's ground force pressure. So it's amazing. I'm going to not pretend I know that much about it, but I know that the BodyTrack mat is an amazing tool, and it's great to help you become aware of it. It's already helped me.
Well, fantastic. Let me just read a little bit about Jan, just to get that part out of the way. I know she'll be joining us here shortly. Jan Beljan, of course, comes from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her golf family, her father, George Beljan, was a golf pro superintendent. 3 of 5 in the golf business brothers were peer-respected PGA professionals. From them, Jan learned the game and business of golf. She began her design career, of course, with Tom Fazio, who I mentioned earlier, with whom she held a senior position in golf course design, construction, and project management for more than 20 years. She worked through Tom Fazio. Her experience as a registered landscape architect, certified arborist, and former assistant superintendent with a unique outlook on the playability, strategy, ecology, economics, and aesthetics of golf courses. Jan also selected the American Society of Golf Course Architects, also known as the ASGCA, in 1990, and represents the ASGCA as a board member of the National Alliance for Accessible Golf and Women in the Golf Industry. She formed her golf course design firm in 2009, which, again, I mentioned, is Jan Golf Course Design, Inc., in 2009, and is the managing partner in the National Women's Golf Alliance. A longtime contributor to multiple rounds of golf, also in December 2000 and February 2005. She was noted in Sports Illustrated Plus lists of the top 10 most influential in the game of golf. In January 2014, she was presented with the Women in Golf Industry's President's Award and the American Society of Golf Architects Design Excellence Award. So as you mentioned, Cindy, very well received in the golf industry and just a great asset. And as soon as she comes on board, we'll bring her here, but I wanted to read that out just to, it's interesting because you don't see or hear of a lot of women in the golf course design end of things. You certainly hear a lot of female professionals, teachers and players and things like that, but you don't really hear of too many in the golf course design. So it's interesting to find out whether or not she sort of initially met with any sort of resistance in that.
I'm sure she did. You know, the only other woman I know that designs golf courses is Jan Stevenson.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny that both their names are Jan?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot have certainly done as many of the on the PGA, like Freddie Couples, get their hands dirty and digging with shots that were. I don't know of too many, very few, even on the men's side, that really do that to the same extent. So certainly, I'm talking about players, of course, but certainly a lot of great men in the industry have created some fantastic golf courses. And she's got quite a list here of while I'm waiting for here, I think just a few of them. Golf Club in Naples, Florida, Wilderness Country Club in Naples, Florida, Jupiter Island Club Hobebound in Florida, St. Andrews Country Club, Raton, Florida, Lake Venice Golf Club in Venice, Florida, and Greenville Lake Country Club in Greenville, South Carolina. So quite an impressive resume, and there's certainly some more here, but certainly a great resume of some tracks that she's either designed or renovated. As you say, quite the laundry list that she's done. I'm excited, so I'm looking forward to her joining us here in just a few moments. Lots of things, happening around in golf. There was an interesting article. I haven't read it yet. I don't know if you have or not, but there was something that came out. I actually got an email last night that Arnold Palmer was going to give some advice. What to say? A lot of
you were
discussion
breaking
lately.
up, Ted. What? I didn't hear what you said about Arnold Palmer. What was the article?
There was an article that came out. I got notification last night that he's given some advice to Tiger to help Tiger in what a lot of people refer to. I don't know if I slump so much. I just think it's a natural time goes on, but it'd be interesting to find out what Arnold has to say. I haven't read it yet, so I'm going to read it tonight. But it'd be interesting to see what Arnold has to say about Tiger and some of the issues that he's dealing with. But I don't know. Have you seen that at all? I
have not seen it. I have not. And again, most of what you said I couldn't hear because you were breaking up. You seem to be a little better right now.
Okay.
But I think what you said is Arnold giving Tiger some advice.
Yes. Yeah. See what happens. Or read what's in that article and that, because Tiger certainly has been struggling a lot lately, and a lot of people have theorized the reasons why. I think a lot of it, in my opinion, goes to what you and I talked about in general for golfers, the mental side of the game, emotions, of course, play. I really don't think it's his physical game. It certainly, maybe has struggled a little bit here, but I really think a lot of it's his emotions and the mental side of his game that's really prevented him from sort of coming back with a solid play. Do you agree with that a little bit, or?
No. I think he's searching to. Sorry, but I gotta be honest. I think he has sought advice from the wrong places, and the committee of they is giving him lessons, and I think he needs to stop and ask himself, look at the history of how he's played, when he's played his best, when he wasn't hurt, and I believe it's a change in too many swing theories, and he's tried to rebuild the building too many times, and I think it's total confusion, and his mind doesn't know what to tell his body to do. Therefore, he's confused. Therefore, he trips himself up. Therefore, he hits that shot. Therefore, he misses the cut. Therefore, he goes home and hurts his back. So I believe that the swing that has been trying to do is hurting his body.
Yeah, I agree. Cindy, I see that Jan has, come on board here, so I'm going to bring her on here, and we'll proceed with the show.
Perfect.
Good morning, Jan, and welcome to the Women.
Good morning, Ted. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Jan. Thank you for joining us.
So pleased to do it. How is your weather everywhere?
A little chilly in Buffalo.
Just checking on golf weather.
Yeah, I'm here in Northwest Florida. A little cool, certainly not as cool as Cindy has been mentioning in Buffalo. But Jan, I already read out some of the information from your bio and that. So we're really good to go. And hope you can hear me okay. Cindy said I'm breaking up a little bit, so I apologize. But one of the first things, Jan, if you wouldn't mind, is you obviously come from a family of golf professionals. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that background first to start us off?
Well, my father and his 5 brothers, my uncles, were all club professionals. They grew up caddying in Pittsburgh. So they learned the game from the ground, literally. And it was because they learned what they did during the Depression, so we're talking the 20s and the 30s, I had a pretty strong basis in the history of golf from at least that far back. You know, we didn't go back to the origins of golf, but that's pretty good background from the perspective of how golf had been in the United States. As you may or may not know, Pittsburgh is one of the great communities for golf, and there were a number of very high-profile golf courses there done by recognized designers. So it's a good place to learn to play. My 3 uncles, Carl, Willie, and Andy Belgian, were all very peer-recognized PGA professionals and worked with a lot of people, a lot of places. One of the most fascinating stories, I believe, has to deal with my uncle Carl Belgian, who used to play in a lot of pro-ams with a certain someone by the name of Arnold Palmer. But in that era, my uncle was the pro and Arnie was the amateur.
Wow.
So, so that goes pretty far back. And I grew up maybe 8 miles from where Mr. Palmer lived and grew up where he grew up. His father, Deacon Palmer, was my father's mentor. My father was both a golf professional and superintendent, and he designed the golf course where I grew up. He also supervised the construction and stayed on to be both the pro and superintendent there. The project was 35 miles from downtown Pittsburgh. It was built on 3 farms. Again, this is back in the mid-'50s, so I was a real youngster then. I didn't know anything that was going on. But as I grew up and my uncles came to visit and I heard my dad and them talking, I learned something whether I wanted to or not. So in having observed later as I matured, because I started working in the golf pro shop when I was 14. For my dad. So I ran the golf tournaments. I was the handicap computer because, as you might guess, there were none then. And my dad said that there's no member going to argue with a 12 or 14-year-old girl about a handicap because all I'm going to do is show them the math, and after they see the math, and that once that'll be enough. I had nothing to win or lose by doing the handicap, so he insisted I do them. He didn't do them. Most other places at that time, it was that was relegated to somebody who could do math. So I learned very early what handicaps actually meant. I learned very early that the handicaps are really a measure of your potential and not necessarily what your everyday score was. For those who don't know, the handicap is the top 10 out of the last 20 scores, and then 90 or 95% of that. I forget what the quote is today, but it still measures your potential of what you can do. So therein, so for people to, what shall I say, sandbag? Have you ever heard that word before?
Yes.
It's a serious effort to do that.
Jan, you worked with, as we mentioned in the opening comments, you worked with Tom Fazio, of course, who is a pioneer in the golf course design business. Is that how you became interested in design golf?
No, actually, I was interested long before, simply because I'd seen what my dad had done at the golf course where I grew up. And part of that, one of the things was that the comments that had been made to him by others who played the game were how nicely the golf course fit into the land that was there. Now, it was nice, gently rolling land, but it was just the vision that my dad had and the creativity that he had. And, of course, it was done in an era when you didn't move a lot of dirt because that just wasn't done. So it was blending everything as smoothly as possible. And then, of course, as I mentioned, he's because he was both a pro and superintendent, and part of the income at that time was merchandise sales in the pro shop. Because the pro owned the shop, it was making sure there were as many people playing golf as possible. So he understood from his caddy days that women love to play golf, and they also love to have the same successes that men had. Sure. And if they could have a par or a birdie, which was so rare, that it was they felt good and they came back and they brought their friends. So I had my inclination about golf course design then. I'm a landscape architect by education, and landscape architecture is probably the best way to convey both graphically and in text your ideas. So, and that's part of what golf course design is about, especially when you talk about permitting and budgeting. I mean, those are the biggest reasons for doing plans of any sort, whether it's for a house or an airplane or a golf course. You say, this is what we're supposing it'll look like, and these are the estimates that we suppose it's going to take to make this creation.
Let me ask you a question. How, if someone has, how many acres do we need? 200 or 300?
Oh, no. In yesteryear, it was said that, the average size golf course was 150 acres. But that would presume that you had all usable area, that you were not discussing environmentally sensitive areas like wetlands or protected uplands or bird sanctuaries or things or very severe topography. That would also presume that you were going to have what was called a core type golf course, where you would have only the golf course without real estate except perhaps at its perimeters. So as soon as you start making the golf course, working within the confines of a piece of property, then it changes. And, of course, there is no such thing as average, because there's no such thing as an average golf course, as we all know. You can certainly fit a par 3 type golf course on a lot less land. You can do something that has 8,000 yards, and that takes a lot more land. So, for the longest time, 150 acres, and that's still kind of a good number for 18 holes. So, and again, core type golf course, par 72, say about 6,950 yards from the tips.
Wow. Does it take a lot of imagination when you're designing a golf course? What sort of thought process? I mean, obviously, if you're doing something for a specific client, they have a vision, but what part do you play in actually helping create the holes? Do you sort of say, okay, we can do this or we can't do that, or you pretty much leave it up to what they want and you just try to make it work?
Well, it's different on every project, because when you start with a raw piece of land, that raw piece of land is wooded usually,
sure,
or it's flat open, such as you might find in the plains of the United States. But if you pick coastal anywhere, and you're almost talking about something with woods on it, whether it's live oaks of South Carolina, palm trees in Florida, white oaks in Maine, Massachusetts, beech trees in Pennsylvania. You've got so there's the land. It's visualizing. First, you start dealing with topography, with topo maps. So it's looking on a piece of paper that shows contour lines. And of course, in this day, people look on computers. It's the contour lines and how the tighter they are together on the paper, then the steeper the slope is. So it begins with routing the golf course, and I've done as many as 40 routings before we come up with one that's going to be
wow.
Yeah. So the amount of time that goes into designing a golf course starts maybe 3 to 10 years before the golf course is ever open.
Wow.
In California, where you have restrictions of where you have to meet requirements for earthquakes and things like that, then there's a lot of review by governmental agencies, whether they're state or federal. And one of the reasons that there is people say, well, golf shouldn't cost as much as it does, but what they really don't understand is the and I'll call them soft costs for lack of a better word, that goes into the design part of it. And that is not just the golf course design, but it's engineers, it's land planners, it's attorneys, it's permits. So as we mentioned earlier, when you think about any kind of wetlands that are jurisdictional, whether by the Army Corps of Engineers or by the state, then you have to meet the criteria, and you have to wait for people to review. Anybody who's ever had a house built, you know what you have to do. I mean, the contractor can go along and be building, and then he has to stop for inspections, for plumbing, for electrical, and it's very similar out on it. They people, there are rules and regulations, and somebody's out there to make sure you're following them. So when those costs are passed on to the consumer, just as if you're building a shopping mall or a 7-Eleven, doesn't matter. So when I start with a raw piece of property, it begins with looking at a topo map and creating several routing plans, presuming that the clubhouse and the parking will begin in a certain place, and on some of them it may begin someplace else because there's costs obviously involved in the entry to the property. So the longer the entry, the more economic impact there is in doing the road and utilities that go from whatever the main road is to the clubhouse. Some places it's warranted because there's a certain atmosphere, natural setting that says this is where the clubhouse should be, whether it's on a promontory so that you have a view, or whether there's of the golf course or overlooking water or something. So there's a reason here's 3 different places where the clubhouse may be, and start holes 1 and 10, finish 9 and 18 there if you can. And if the property doesn't allow it, then maybe it's non-returning 9s. So there are a lot of different things that go in. So you do several plans and you say, here are the pros to this one, here's the cons to this one. Well, we don't like this, but we do like that, so let's blend these 2 together here, generate another plan, so here we go. And, now how much dirt are we going to have to move? How much clearing are we going to have to do? Oh, well, we don't want to do that much, or we want to do more, so let's do this and let's do that. So now you're into round 3. So there may be as many as 10 iterations before you get to something that's deemed final enough to create construction drawings, which would tell how much earth is moved and how many acres of clearing there is, and how much drainage is meant to be installed, and what kind of grass is going to be put where, whether it's in the fairways or the roughs. They might be different turf types, how large the putting greens are, and then what the landscape might be. So it's so you get, and it's the same as if you're doing a house. How many windows are you going to have in your house? How many doors, and line item costs for all of that. So when you get to construction documents, it's not just doing the drawings, then it's preparing the specifications for construction for the contractor and the bid sheets. So the estimated prices, a schedule of prices. And then it's sent out to qualified bidders, and there might be 5 or 6 or 7, depending, and give them 3 or 4 weeks to come up with numbers and then evaluate what comes in and say, here we go.
Right.
So, and that's before you turn any dirt.
Wow. typically, and I know that's probably a pretty big range or a pretty big number, but typically on your average golf course out there, maybe not today's courses so much, but what kind of a cost are you looking to build from design to completion? What kind of numbers, just on average maybe, or a range you even give us?
Well, this is right now there are probably as maybe 14 or 15 new courses a year under construction in the United States, which is a far cry from the heyday that many people remember when there were. So the costs are different, and it changes. It's just like anything else when there's supply and demand, and it all depends on who's supplying and who's demanding. So, what is going to cost to do something like a Chevy Volt? What is going to cost to do an Escalade Cadillac? What's going to cost to do a Mercedes?
Right.
And who wants that price point? So, it all has to do with demographics. So, what does the immediate area? What will support the project? So, it could be done for as little as several $1 million, like $4 to $5 million. It could be as much as $20 million, and again, it depends on to whom it's marketed and who will support it demographically. I'm not trying to dodge this, but it's just the reality. No.
I can't get a finite number. I realize that. I was just trying to get an idea, and that was pretty much what I envisioned. Jen, as we mentioned earlier before you came on live, you have quite a list of courses that you've worked on. Can you share maybe some of your favorites that you've worked on?
Well, I've had fun on all of them because everything has a different challenge, and there are reasons that make the course I'm working on at the moment is my favorite, because that is I'm enamored of it. I'm trying to do the best I can. I have a vision that says, okay, this is what it looks like now. How will this appear in 2 years after there's a little maturity? What's it going to be like in 5 years when it's been around a while, and then in 10 years it's going to feel established and traditional. So it's always fun for me to look at that. But I've enjoyed working on the MacArthur Club up in Hobestown, Florida, because it had a range of wetlands and uplands, and there are different different zones, different vegetative zones that had to be respected and weed the golf course through it. That was also, I was working on that course when 9/11 happened, so I'll always remember it for that reason. There's a course in Naples, Florida called the Old Collier Golf Club, which I worked on, where that was the first course that state in the 48 states, the lower 48, that used one of the newer Seashore Pass Palums over the entire golf course. And so that was revolutionary because we had really only seawater to irrigate the golf course, and that was the only turf type that would allow that to happen. So dealing with the surrounds of the golf course was interesting over and beyond the actual creation of the golf holes. At Bonita Bay East, there were 36 golf holes, and they were meant to be two different appearing and feeling and playing golf courses on the same property. And to do that concurrently or sequentially requires a lot of creativity and to not be repetitive. I worked up at Worldwoods in Brooksville, Florida, which was really an outstanding opportunity. Some Japanese folks had bought the property some years back, and they had a 50-year plan. So that was interesting to see what they had in mind, because that's how they work. I worked at Black Diamond, where the original 18 holes had the quarry, and then there were another 27 holes done that were completely different in style and feel from the quarry golf course. So let's see, Johns Island West up in Vero Beach, unbelievable piece of property, inland, upland, straight, working on a sand dune in scrub, and to see what it's become today is just fabulous. I think they're having the mid-amateur there in October. So, then I worked on a property. It was a total redo down in Pompano. George Fazio had done the original design back in the early 80s, and new owners came in and they wanted to upgrade it, and then so kind of keeping the same routing plan but changing the grades and refining the bunkers and updating the golf course for contemporary play. Let's see, we finished planting, I think, in late August. In January, early January was at that time a Nike event, which is theweb.com, and Kurt Byram won that. So I actually played in the Pro-Am there with Jim Dent, which was quite fun. So anyway, it was different things for different reasons.
Right.
Sometimes there's a price point. This is the budget you have to stay within. So that's a parameter, and there's no exceeding it. So how can you do the most for the least? I mean,
right.
that's fun. That's fun in and of itself.
Do you have a favorite style of course or type of course that you prefer? Just your own personal preference. As an example, maybe you like more of the traditional type courses like a Pinehurst or something along that lines where it's tree lined and that, or do you like your newer designs where it's more open like a link style course, or do you not really have a preference?
Well, I think maybe I can help with that by saying that geographically, the geography, the topography of the land is really going to tell what you can do with the property. So when you have, the links style might be where there are naturally open areas or maybe unnaturally because it was cleared farmland. But
right.
So that would say this is the style of golf course that belongs here. I mean, to have a great open farm area and then to plant the whole thing with trees, does that make sense? Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
But if that's what the owner wants, then maybe that's what you do. But you might say, well, maybe buy a piece of property that already has the trees instead of this. So one of the real revelations to me was my first trip to England, Scotland, Ireland back in the early 80s, and I went from coastal, which was very link style, which I hadn't experienced before because I'm from Pittsburgh and we don't have any oceans there. So
right.
It went from that to inland to someone like Blair Gowrie up in the heartland of the country, and the whole thing was just ringed by birch trees, and it was fabulous. So it's just what belongs in the area. So I like seeing what's indigenous. Think about coastal anywhere, Pebble Beach. What is Pebble Beach if it was just all clear? Well, it wouldn't be Pebble Beach. By the same token, what would Bandon Dunes be if it had trees all over the place? So does that help? So
yes.
I just like how things fit in.
Yeah.
When you do you prefer a person who wants to build a new golf course to contact you before they buy the property?
Well, that would be ideal if they have the luxury of that kind of wherewithal and choice. Yes, that would be because they could then see. We could go through the exercise of saying just the demographics of this would work best here because of this, or this. I mean, let's just take a place like Atlanta. And you think about if you've ever spent any time there, and you might know that north of the airport is more populated than and a busier kind of place than south of the airport. So if you want to have more people, you might find a piece of property north of the airport. If you wanted to have fewer people and a different kind of sense of style, then it might be south of the airport. Does that make sense? So
absolutely.
Kind of what do they have in mind, and for the overall philosophy of the club.
Do you ever, Jan? Do you ever get a situation just sort of on that theme where a client contacts you that maybe has already purchased the land and has their own vision? We would love, whatever the vision might be, and you have to sort of burst their bubble and say, you're just not going to be able to do that. You had to do that and just sort of rework a plan for them that is, a doable plan. Have you ever had a situation where you've had to do that?
Sure. It's not just every project; it's every day on every project because most of us. There's an adage that's very popular for a reason.
Right.
The champagne taste and beer budget. I mean, it's popular in everything. So it may be that sort of, and often it comes down to a preference. Okay, what's your priority? Which is more important, this or this? Okay, well, let's do this, and then perhaps later you can do that, because that's something that's more kind of surface, but you really want to have the infrastructure. Sort of if you were doing a house, and you knew you can't afford maybe to put a television in every room. Nonetheless, you're going to wire it for cable because, or for that, or for your other electronics, because you don't want to go tear the walls apart to put the new wire back there, right? So it's the things that are underground, the things that people don't see, but that cost a lot of money, like drainage and irrigation. Who sees irrigation unless the water's flying? And certainly nobody sees the drainage unless they're out on the golf course when it's pouring rain and they see the water all going downhill to somewhere. So those are the kinds of things that are where I say, well, geez, if you want to spend your money wisely, this is where it can be spent most usefully for the long term, but it's balancing with what's the curb appeal. And if you've ever bought a house or sold a house, the interior may just look great, but if you don't have that curb appeal on the outside, who's going to even walk into the door? So it's sort of the same thing. So you need to have a curb appeal along with the functionality of the project.
Right.
How many projects can you be on at one time, and what types of mixtures are they?
Oh, that's a terrible question.
Welcome to the Women of Golf.
Well, it's of course I can only ever be physically on one project at a time, but to juggle several, it depends on what's happening on each of the projects at any, what's happening with them. Is it planning or is it site work? So the planning is planning takes an awful lot of time, because it's making sure. Remember, there are documents that a lot of people will see, and you have to be as accurate as possible to get good numbers, to get good estimates, so that you know what's feasible and what isn't, and to do a planned cash flow for not just the project, but for the years after the project, because there might be expenditures, because they can't, as you just said, Ted, do everything at once. You may want to do your priorities. So I can probably comfortably deal with 4 or 5 in different, but not all doing the same thing. When golf courses get under construction, one of the most important things is to have qualified contractors, people who know what they're doing, people who you can trust, to explain, to lay out what's happening, and then they can implement it for your review. So in a day or two, you can say, we're going to do all of this. This is okay. Let's tweak this, and then do the same thing in another project, wherever else that is. So obviously the proximity makes a difference. Thankfully, I'm not doing anything out of the country, because you've done air travel lately, haven't you?
Yes.
I'm
on my way to the airport right now.
So you know how tedious it is and time consuming, and there's something I like to say. When I'm driving, there are 3 things I figured out I can't do. I can't read, I can't write, and I can't sleep. And all 3 of those things I need to do for my work.
Yeah.
And everybody else does too.
Jan, let me ask you something just out of curiosity. Has there ever been a project where, all the stars sort of aligned and you actually even exceeded your own expectations? You sort of stood back and went, wow, it came out even better than I had hoped.
Every project, because if you start with a vision, and we all have imaginations about something or something else, and to have a vision of it and say, well, this is what I would like for it, how I would like for it to appear when it's completed, and then when it does exceed that, because the talent on the ground was so good, meaning the shapers, and as important, more importantly, is the golf course superintendent, the guy who grows in the golf course and who maintains it, and his staff. So, as an instance, I worked on one project where there was a superintendent hadn't grown anything in before, and he was a young guy, a lot of talent. Really, he's extremely well considered now nationally. He's grown that much, but in his early years, he really didn't know how to get his team to mow when you have young turf, and so there were marks all over the place and ruts that always had to be repaired, and so the product didn't have near the finished appearance that it could have if he had been able to corral his team a little better. So the stars, so when you talk about the stars aligning, the stars are the shapers, the stars are the contractors, the stars are the golf course superintendents and their team. So the stars really do have to align in a metaphorical way and in a real way.
Jane, in 2000-2005, you were noted in Sports Illustrated Plus lists of the top 10 most influential women in the game of golf, and then subsequently in 2014 you were presented with the Women in the Golf Industry President's Award and the American Society of Golf Course Architects Design Excellence Award. How does it make you feel to be recognized as a major contributor to golf?
Oh, it's incredible, because in each of those cases I was not aware that I was that I was being selected. So in each of the cases I was told by someone else that the Sports Illustrated magazine articles were sent to me by men in the industry with whom I had worked, and so just to be recognized that way and to be a contributor, to be able to let women know that there is another woman out there doing something for them, doing something a little bit different than most every other woman is, designing golf. So that was monumental to me, because there's responsibility that goes with that. It's continuing to represent not just me and my profession and my personal career, but all women. So it's huge. It's huge.
Did you find that there was some, especially initially when you first got into your business, some resistance, being one of the very few women in golf course design? It's obviously, much like the rest of golf, was primarily a male-dominated sport for many, many years. Did you find a little bit of resistance when you early on, and do you still find a little bit here and there?
Well, I think that there might have been a little, but I wasn't very aware of it, which is kind of silly maybe.
Good.
but because that was not my problem, that was somebody else's problem. They took it upon themselves to be resistant. I'm a professional. I always conducted myself professionally. I have knowledge. If I didn't have the knowledge, and again, remember that when Tom Fazio hired me, he didn't have the recognized name that he came to have. But for him to take a chance on somebody and anybody, and I was one of those bodies, that was pretty good. And so my responsibility is to my clients, to the person for whom I was working, as well as to myself, because we all are responsible for that. We're responsible for what we become by our choices and our decisions. And so any resistance there may have been, that had to be behind my back. I didn't know, because nobody ever said anything to me. And so I've worked through it, if there was any. And now I think that I've earned my good reputation. I think probably the most powerfully impactful day was when I learned I was elected into the American Society of Golf Course Architects back in 1990. And 100 guys, because Alice Dye was the only woman then, so when 100 guys say you're talented enough, you're good enough, you do work that's equal to what we do, be part of us, that was monumental. That was huge. That was just monumental. So, and thankfully, I would say that all of the members have been very supportive. Without all the men who have supported me, I wouldn't be where I am. So there are a lot of men out there who do support not just me, but other women in the golf industry.
Right.
Jan, you were recently at the Golf Industry Show.
Yes.
And you told me that people were very interested in how to engage more women in golf. And you help us with the playing field. Can you tell us how you make it more accessible?
Well, yes. I think let's start, kind of to where we are. Let's go back in history a little bit. Maybe that helps people understand why many women struggle with the game of golf at the current yardages. If you think about the yesteryear, and I'm going to call to mind a movie or two in that way, because that's really kind of the only way some of us can, because we weren't born then. If you think about the movies in which Katharine Hepburn played, Pat and Mike, where she played Babe Zaharias, and if you not the Philadelphia Story, but Bringing Up Baby, where she plays with Cary Grant, she's out on the golf course. The women who played golf in that era were sports women. They were the women who could afford to do that. They were the women who were athletically inclined. They rode horses, they swam, they played tennis. They were sports women. So after World War II, then it became possible, because there was a surge in golf course design and construction, that more women could play. But they were still playing from the sets of markers where the sportswomen were playing. And those sportswomen were playing from a set of markers, a yardage that was, they kind of inherited from the men who didn't play as well, or didn't hit the ball as far because they had slower club head speed. So those yardages stayed there, 5,600 yards, 5,800 yards. Pick a course in the Northeast, and that's what you have. So then we ended up with irrigation systems that made, the ground softer, and there wasn't as much roll. You might remember, Cindy, playing in your youth where you had some career drives because the ground was so hard. And
yeah. I was long for once. So when you think about that, then as we got some irrigation there, and it kind of softened things, then it made it a lot more different for women to get the roll and to be able to get on the greens in regulation. And so they've, in those years between the 50s and now, so what is that? We're talking 60 years, women have kind of played at a disadvantage. So in order to help them, if you look at their club head speeds, which might the average woman, according to the United States Golf Association, their course rating, they say the average woman is the bogey golfer, and her course, her handicap might be between 22.6 and 26.4. So let's just round it off to like a 24. And she can hit the ball. When you look at course ratings, so when you look on your scorecard and you see both a course rating and a slope rating, and the slope rating is their standard is 113. So if it's above 113, and the difference between the slope rating and the course rating is what the excellent or the scratch golfer would play, which is the course rating, and then the slope rating would be what the bogey golfer might expect to play from that same set of markers. So if you have somebody playing at a 24 handicap, and again we talked potential. Yep. So a 24 plus 72, that's a 96. But that's the top 10 out of the last 20. So you can see the potential, she might actually be scoring 105 and 110 with the differentials that they can post. So if you look at what the male average golfer is, that male bogey player has a handicap between 17 and 21. So why the difference? 17 and 21 versus 22 and 26. There's 4 strokes there. Well, it's because the courses are that much longer for the women players. They cannot get on in regulation. They're proportionately
the holes are too long for them. So
setting up to fail. Yeah.
They can't get on. And I mean, if they're two sequential best shots, what the USGA says, the par 4 for the average woman player can hit the ball 150 yards, and then can get on a 280-yard par 4 in 2. So that's 280 less 150 is 130. That means her second shot would be 130 yards. Well, that also says that if any of those people who have a golf course out there with a par 4 longer than 280, means that there's very little likelihood that women will get on that hole in regulation. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely.
So unless it's downhill and downwind maybe, but all other things being equal. So if you want women to have the same enjoyment out of golf that men have, then make it so that they could get on in regulation, which of course would mean repositioning tees. Now, the woman of whom I just spoke is the bogey woman golfer. And 50% of women, when I looked at the 2012 USGA statistics on handicap indices, they fully 50% of women have a handicap above 25. And 10.1% have a handicap between 39 and 40.4. And they still play golf. 10%. Even now, if you were taking 40 strokes above par, Ted, would you still play golf? But women do, and that's the exciting part.
Yeah,
they like the game so much.
Yeah, and I can tell you from knowing a few people that I work with as an instructor that are in that 30 range, they're about ready to give up the game just because of their ego. They just can't handle. Women have a different perspective in the way they play the game, I think, than men do. Men allow their egos to get too closely intermingled, if you will, with their golf game. And if they're not hitting it, as far as what they're watching some of the players on TV, or if they're not shooting lower scores, they become very frustrated and agitated and play less and less, where women tend to, I think, look at it as more of a challenge than men do. And it's more of a social thing as well. They just enjoy the opportunity to be able to go out and play. And I think it's great that more and more women, I love the fact that more and more women are playing golf, and I wish we could take it a step further and get more couples out playing golf as well. I think it would probably save a lot of marriages, believe it or not.
Well, I agree with you there, but I think that's a story for another day.
Yeah, I know. Jan, I just wanted to ask you, we only got just a few minutes here, but I wanted to give you an opportunity just to answer this last question. With so many courses that have been hit hard through the recession and really there was some oversaturation there for a while, what's the future hold, do you think, for golf course design? Where do you see the direction of that market going?
Well, as I said earlier, there are about 14 courses being new courses this year, and as many in the past couple of years, and probably about the same for the near future, until we get back to equilibrium to what we had before. About 1990, there was about a very stable platform of number of golfers supporting a number of golf courses. So developers kind of got a little excited and just overdeveloped. So the contemporary golf is going to be, a lot of it's going to be bringing golf courses that are now 20 to 30 years old,
bringing them back.
Just bringing them to contemporary standards, and some of that's going to be doing exactly what we're saying, which is to make them more female friendly. But in doing that, they become more family friendly, and I think that's when you'll start having more couples golf, because you can play from tees that suit you, and he's not waiting on her to have 6 or 7 shots before she gets on the green. And no wonder he gets frustrated. She just can't propel the ball. So I think that very much is a trend right now, is people can see. And it's also the USGA and the PGA of America began the Tee It Forward program. So if you want to have Tee It Forward, then let's be respectful of the people we're asking to move forward. One of the most brilliant groups of women I've met is in Naples, Florida. These women at this particular club, they said they and their husbands bought the club 20 and 25 years ago when they were 50 and 55. So now they're 70 to 80 years old, and the guys figured it out. Well, we're moving up. Our egos, we don't have to worry about egos anymore.
That's right.
and so the lady said, "Where's ours? Where's ours?
Good for them.
We can't move forward." So
Good for them.
that's the kind of thing that I see happening. And so when there are some women who say, "Well, we don't want to play from those; they're too short," and of course I say, "We're not taking anything away from you. We're giving you something. We're giving you choice. You now have the choice to hit further forward and work on your short game, or you have the choice to hit back here and do something different and score high." So it's choice, which is the same choice that men have had for so long. I mean, think about the tees that are rated for men, Ted. How many do you find?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
You know,
Jan,
I mean,
you're amazing. Wow, I'm absolutely flabbergasted. We've got to have you back on. This was a great show. You're just a wealth of knowledge.
Well, it was very interesting. It's been very interesting because it's a part of the game that really I'm not as familiar with the design and that, and you really shed a lot of light on interesting things. Thank you very much, Jan, for joining us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Sounds great. Well, you have a great rest of the week, and we will definitely, as Cindy said, we'll definitely have you back again.
All right. Be well. Enjoy the week. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. That was incredible, Cindy. You know, really, it's probably one of the interesting discussions that I think we've certainly. They're all interesting, but really shed a lot of light. She's certainly a very knowledgeable woman about golf in general, but really about the courses and just how they are set up and how they really should be set up, and just a wealth of knowledge. What a great guest.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful, and I don't think I paid attention as much as I could or should have to what goes on behind the scenes. So I'm grateful for all that she has done and every other golf course architect. And, you know, it's like, wow, you never even think about these things.
Yeah, and as she said, there's a lot of preparation. The one thing I didn't know is really how far out from actually building the course, how you know, certainly you expected maybe a couple of years planning, but as she said, you know, 5 as much as even 10 years out. That's a big commitment.
It sure
you know,
is.
from somebody. That's just incredible. But Cindy, we got to wrap it up. Unfortunately, I hated to end that show. I could have gone another hour, but we want to thank Cindy and I want to thank all of you for tuning in each and every week. We thank the listeners from all around the world for listening to the broadcast. We hope you enjoyed today's, particularly with Jan Beljan. And we also appreciate many of the guests like Jan that have come on the program, and it's through their efforts and shared time on the program over this last year or so that have certainly helped to make the Women of Golf a great show. Thank you again, and don't forget to tune in next week at 9 a.m. Eastern Time here on blogtalkradio.com, where Cindy now will bring you another great guest. Cindy, have a great week and great weekend, and welcome down to Florida when you get here. And we will see you next week right here on the Women of Golf Show.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.